great British fighter aircraft, the Vampire, the early examples of pure day fighters. They weren't too late to see wartime service, but they, in the early post-war years, notched up so many incredible feats. Not that long since we lost the legendary Captain Eric Winkle-Brown, that great test pilot. Well, he made the first ever aircraft carrier landing and takeoff using a jet aircraft with a Vampire Mark I aboard HMS Ocean on the 3rd of December 1945. Appropriately enough, the Sea Vampire became the first jet ever to see service with the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy. Another notable first was when in July 1948 Vampire Mark III's of number 54 Squadron Royal Air Force became the first RAF jets to cross the Atlantic, and in fact they were the first jets of any description to cross the Atlantic because they just beat a group of US Air Force Lot 80 stars that were going in the other direction.
There's so many things I know about
number
planes,
54 Squadron that formed the RAF's first ever jet aerobatic team.
When you know how many things can go wrong.
Vampires. There was even a team of Vampires based in Germany with number 16 Squadron that flew aerobatics tied together. Well, we're not going to see any aerobatics from these Vampires, nor are they tied together, but it's a very tight formation. Vampire service as a pure fighter was fairly brief, but the fighter-bomber variants, the first of which was the FB-5 in 1949, were very successful. The RAF used them extensively with the units of the 2nd Tactical Air Force in Germany, as well as with the Middle East Air Force and the Far East Air Force, and they used them in counterinsurgency operations against Malayan terrorists. The Mark IX was the last of the fighter-bomber variants in RAF service, and they were optimized for operations in tropical conditions. First of the two-seat Vampires was the NF-10 night fighter, which was pretty short-lived, but then came the T-11 trainer, and it was the first jet type on which RAF pilots gained their wings. It replaced the North American Harvard at the last stage of the flying training school syllabus. T-11 was phased out by the RAF from 1967 with the arrival of the Hawker Siddeley Gnat. Nations use Vampires of one type or another. They were built under license in Australia,
by a girl falling over in a chair behind me.
And in Italy. As for Norway, it had 62 Vampires in total, 20 of them Mark III fighters. There were 36 FB-52 fighter bombers and 6 T-55 trainers, 336 and 337 squadrons, and the jet training wing used them. The Royal Norwegian Air Force from 1949 to 57. They were employed on air defence, ground attack and advanced training duties. The aircraft are in the markings of 336 Squadron, which was Norway's first fighter squadron to be equipped entirely with jets when the Vampire came along, and when you see them land you may spot the Mickey Mouse emblem on the two-seat trainer. That's the one leading this formation. That emblem was worn by the original Norwegian aircraft that wore the codes that have been painted on this one, and several other Norwegian Vampires in their day had cartoon character emblems. One carried Donald Duck, another one Goofy, and another one Sylvester the Cat. Anyone who's ever flown a Vampire comments on just what a sweet handling aeroplane it was and remains. Beautiful air display mount both in its day and now. Yes, they're not currently allowed to perform aerobatics that's displayed over land in the UK, but we can see what a graceful close formation performance they put on. There's a pretty good historic jet scene that's developed in Norway, as George was saying. The historical squadron has these two Vampires and a MiG-15. They've also got a Canadian-built T-33, Lockheed T-33, on strength, which isn't currently flying, but hopefully soon will be. And a separate organisation in Norway has recently returned an F-104 Starfighter to flight on their civil register, so fingers crossed we may see that British side. Scandinavia in general has been very proficient at preserving examples of past jets, as the Swedish Air Force historic flight presence indicates in the static park here. Very welcome visitors, and also plenty of British connections there, because the J-29, the Saab J-29, the Tunnan, that's the oldest of the four Swedish historic jets we've got in the static display, is a machine that used a Rolls-Royce Ghost engine built under license in Sweden, and the British test pilot took it for its maiden flight. So they were very, very strong connections at that time. The Vampires of the historical squadron have flown together with their modern counterparts in Royal Norwegian Air Force service, the Air F-16 Fighting Falcons. But nowadays spending much more of their time on the UK airshow circuit, and indeed they're currently the only Vampires regularly being displayed on the British scene.
I think I just calling there for the final pass coming into brake to land. The sky looking very dramatic now. In fact, it's clearing well enough for a red arrows display, isn't it?
Oops, a typhoon display.
Shouldn't have said that. Yeah.
There's a lot of display.
There they go, on the break, the Vampire T-55 first, the Vampire FB6 following, leading the team, the founder and the boss of the Norwegian Air Force Historical Squadron, Kenneth Oksvisla. He started flying gliders in his teens. He then did his military service with the Norwegian Army, working as a Ford Air controller and also as the pilot of a Cessna 01 Bird Dog Ford Air control aeroplane.
Yeah, you look good.
Then joined SAS, Scandinavian Airlines, and is fairly recently retired as a Boeing 737 captain, but then he now dedicates his time to the historic jets in the historic squadron fleet. Well, he might, given the number of display commitments they have all around the British Isles and into mainland Europe as well.
No, it's one of the trying to get more out of it. Well, lump sum wasn't it?
Number two in the formation today was Rolf Neum, one of the true legends of the warbird scene in Europe. He was one of the youngest ever frontline pilots in a NATO squadron when he first started serving in the Royal Norwegian Air Force on the Northrop F5, the freedom fighter variant of that design. He too became a Scandinavian Airlines captain after his considerable Air Force service. And he started flying warbirds while he was doing his flying training in the Norwegian Air Force, which was performed out in the States with the US Air Force, and carried that on when he returned to Europe. For many years he was a regular pilot with the old flying machine company at Duxford, and if you know the scenes with the Aero L-39 Albatross jet trainers in the James Bond film Tomorrow Never Dies, it's Rolf who's flying one of those in the film. He also flew in the making of Memphis Belle, the Catherine Weiler and David Putnam Memphis Belle film that came out in 1990. And he's now back firmly on the display circuit with not just the historical squadron as here, but he's also been flying for the fighter collection at Duxford again this year with their Curtiss Hawk 75, another aircraft that served with the wartime Royal Norwegian Air Force, so plenty of connections in his background. And incidentally, Rolf was absolutely delighted last year when, just after he started flying the Vampire, he was able to take his father Kjell flying. Kjell now well into his 80s, but still flying himself, still instructing himself, and it was the first time he'd flown in a Vampire since his initial training days in the Norwegian Air Force in the 1950s. So a wonderful family connection there, rolling out after a typically polished display, the two Havilland Vampires of the Norwegian Air Force Historical Squadron, flown by Kenneth Vogtisa and Rolf Neum. Well, now one item still remains, and from RAF jet fighters of the early post-war years, we turn to the cutting edge of Royal Air Force multi-role combat capability. And we're looking out to our left.